So before we kick off and get too much in depth, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of CERT's perspective in this space. These points are actually been the same for a year or two now. We feel like malware propagation methods, they're including a lot of simultaneous different attacks. You have things like exploit kits that try multiple exploits against a user when they visit a web page. Malware's still modifying configuration files in order to embed itself. Guessing passwords, brute force in general, still popular. And above all, tricking the end user and the human element in general is still the weak link. Humans are the frequent weak link, and phishing is still prevalent, and it's getting better. The basic technique an attacker still uses is establishing a foothold inside a network and moving laterally as they need to until they accomplish their objective. Malware sophistication continues to climb. Anti-reverse techniques such as packing encryption and rootkits continue to get better. In addition to that, we also have techniques that can allow malware to, if not avoid reverse engineering, make active analysis more difficult by detecting its presence on virtual machines and other obfuscation methods that attackers are always trying to come up with. Malware is still really popular in the plug-in based systems. Java, Flash, still very popular vectors of attack. They use distributed systems architecture. They spread themselves via a wide range of malicious IP addresses, via a wide range of techniques, anything from Office documents to web drive-by attacks to the occasional zero-day exploit, which is pretty rare, but it does happen. Automated exploitation with tools such as Metasploit provides large collections of ready-to-use exploits. Metasploit can be used as a legitimate tool, but it also is a catalog of most known vulnerabilities that are in the wild. So the tools for attackers to use are very easily available. Attacker stealth enhanced by malware variants. So every time an attacker changes a piece of malware or changes any code in the malware, the hash or numerical value associated with that piece of code changes. This makes signature identification all that more difficult and requires the use of a deeper dive into what the malware is doing on the system to actually detect it, or for someone to find the malware, hash it, and then submit that variant to an antivirus company. Use of expected protocols is on the rise. Typically, a lot of malware in the past would try and filter in through a unlocked protocol on an unlocked port or some other easy way in. Now they're going in through the front door via typical traffic, HTML, whatever they can use to get in. If it's unlocked, they'll try it and probably find a vulnerability. Although automated software updates have accelerated the patch cycle, organizations continue to struggle with patching. This has been a problem for 10 years and it'll probably continue to be a problem. Updating systems is hard for enterprises and it's hard for individuals too. People don't want to take the time to update, or they don't have network access, or there's systems that are sitting offline for long times, just running without maintenance, that simply remain vulnerable to infection because nobody's taken the time to examine them. Some new vulnerability mitigation methods being used, though. Automated bug hunting. In this context, that means not aliens. It means the fuzzing of software that's in development or after development. And what fuzzing is, you take a binary and attempt to put in different inputs into input spaces and attempt to create bugs or crashes that would allow you to exploit that code. Fuzzing will do that in an automated way and hopefully find a lot of the bugs or vulnerabilities that are in the software at that time. High throughput security testing. This is a kind of a new in vogue with penetration testing, and that a lot of penetration tests in the past have had to kind of light foot their way through systems because they're attempting to really discover what's obviously vulnerable in systems, but also attempting not to disrupt services with a particular organization. The idea behind high throughput security testing is that when you have an attacker coming at a system, they'll often use a number of techniques to break in, including maybe even denial of service attacks, which generate large amounts of traffic against you. They might do that as a prelude to an attempted compromise of a system. Because when you do those attacks, denial of service attacks, it often requires the company to either soften a certain part of their network policy or make changes that the attacker can then exploit. Another thing that's come around in the past 3 or 4 years, probably longer actually now that I think about it, bug bounties have been a thing for a while. Major companies will pay white hat hackers, or I don't know if it's particularly even white hat hackers, to go out, look for vulnerabilities in their software, and then pay them a flat fee for disclosing it. And then crowdsourcing reports of vulnerabilities in vendor software. So sometimes vendors are just depending on people to tell them when they encounter bugs that could be exploited. And it probably doesn't work as well as bug bounties, but it is something that's being actively pursued. In addition to that, modern operating systems are supporting features for vulnerability mitigation, like address space layout randomization, which is a technique to where particular memory addresses that are important to an operating system and often exploited by malware are moved around to a point where it almost seems random, so that whenever malware attempts to write to those addresses and can't follow where the operating system is going, it'll cause a crash or a similar indication that malware might be present. Or the malware might not even be able to install itself properly at all. Data execution prevention is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a ability for an operating system to detect when data is being downloaded and simply stop it before it installs on the system. And Microsoft has a pretty cool utility called EMIT, the Enhanced Mitigation Experience Toolkit, and it does a lot of things, including memory examination on particular systems, looking for memory activity that's similar to malicious code. Common problems still exist. The asymmetric attacks that your companies are dealing with from both small and large hacking or criminal organizations are still there, and they're getting better at them, and smaller groups can do them. You don't need to be a group of 25 hackers to buy a toolkit off of an underground forum and attack someone. In addition, denial of service has gotten bigger as available resources have increased. In addition to botnets still being around, denial of service has also come back even more into vogue because of the ability of attackers to amplify their attacks via the use of vulnerable both DNS and NTP servers. In addition, smartphones, home automation, embedded devices, and the networking of all those are just giving the attackers more places to attack, more places to look for vulnerabilities, and more places to steal information or to commit espionage or sabotage or whatever it is they're interested in. So common problems still exist, and defending those systems is still difficult. And fixing these problems is still difficult in addition. Default administrator passwords are still out there. People don't reset the default password on the routers. There's a problem with lack of encryption on systems still. A lot of computers you get won't have encryption turned on by default. Certain variants of Windows up until now haven't had encryption on all their home versions that are shipped to just your standard consumer. Lack of strong authentication. Two-factor authentication still isn't particularly common, and passwords are still not particularly good. There's a lot of repeat password use and a lot of weak password use. And finally, insecure code. Developers simply either aren't really concerned with or don't know how to write secure software. So ForcePoint has a nice report that has some interesting tidbits of information. this past couple years, 99% of the malware artifacts referenced command and control URLs seen in previous samples. What this means is that malware downloaded from particular websites or locations on the internet, those addresses where the malware is downloaded from had been previously observed in 99% of cases. That is just a matter of not having URLs on your blacklist and something that can be avoided. Normal security technologies displayed disconcerting vulnerabilities. Examples include Heartbleed and shell shock. And why these are important is because Heartbleed lies at the core of a lot of encryption that works on the internet today. OpenSSL is extremely important for the way secure communications and secure finances work on the internet. And shell shock is basically unpatched an ability to compromise any Unix machine just by pinging it. There's no user interaction required. It is a very serious problem. And you may think Unix, I don't really use Unix much, but your Mac does at its core, and a lot of web servers do at their core, and web servers are pretty important to the internet. And some good news, there's been, according to ForcePoint, a small reduction in security threats. Now, before we go examine any more of these sources, it's important to remember that ForcePoint and Symantec and Kaspersky, what they're seeing is based off of what their sensors are seeing. So in order to get a full picture for yourself, you might want to look at several of these different sources and continue to keep updated on them, because even if Symantec isn't seeing an increase or a decrease, maybe Kaspersky is, or maybe Dell Secure Works is. Maybe somebody with a different set of sensors is seeing something that others are not. So Symantec, their findings this year were pretty interesting. There's a small decrease in breaches, but there's an absolutely massive increase in spear phishing. And their general theory behind this was that attackers may not be getting more prevalent, or detection may not be getting more prevalent, but the attacks are getting more effective. Some good news, spam volume dropped. And in some less good news, there's still a huge amount of phishing emails. Even 0.25% of email coming across the internet being a phishing email results in just a massive amount of data going across that's just attacks. So Kaspersky, they have a couple interesting graphs. This particular one I like because it lays out really clearly what is being exploited and it kind of shows you over time what's getting worse. So as we talked about before, and kind of along with CERT's findings, plugins are very popular. Java Virtual Machine is here. Adobe Flash Player is here. In addition, we have the web browser drive-by attacks, which by far constitute the largest majority. And finally, we have what you'd call attachment-based attacks. So Office documents, PDFs opened in Adobe Reader, and there's also a small increase in malware on mobile devices. So your phone is increasingly becoming a target, according to Kaspersky data. Mandiant produces some pretty interesting things, and their data from this past year, we saw a slight decrease in the number of breaches discovered internally, and a very large amount of people are being notified of those breaches by an external entity. Now that may sound bad, but this has two meanings. One, maybe people aren't seeing it and are being notified externally, but two, maybe they're being notified by some sort of sharing service or some sort of community that they belong to. And you can kind of see that in the next number, where the amount of days that an attack goes unacknowledged on a system is actually down 24 to 202. So it's still the better part of a year, but that's still good. 24 days is a big drop. And keep in mind, still, this is what Mandiant is seeing on the sensors they have. That's the only way you can get that kind of information. That or through a survey. Of observed phishing emails, 78% were IT or security related. So phishing attacks are really trying to get in to security and IT, or trying to compromise people by portraying themselves to be security or IT related. Attackers target organizations not just for intellectual property, but PII, as you probably almost certainly know. Hackers love stealing your personally identifiable information, including your credit cards. Credit cards are a huge target. If they're attacking you as an organization, they might be attacking you for some sort of industrial espionage, your intellectual property.